little bit more talking while you do the headphone switcheroo and celebrate that lovely clap.
It's a good one. It's a good one. Yeah, you happy with it?
Sweet. I'm very happy with it, mate.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, I thought so. You should be. It was a good one.
Cheers, mate.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Cheers, man. Yeah, no, it made a good noise.
I do like a good noise. I do like a good noise.
Oh.
Every now and then, there'll be a weird. This can sound weird, but if I'm kissing Nadia and when we pull apart, do you get that sort of like weird, like slight pop sound?
Yeah.
That's my favourite.
Yeah, man, I get that all the time when I'm kissing Nadia. Like, something about her lips.
Oh, congratulations!
I don't know what you're going to do with
Congratulations, Chris. You've won the podcast.
I don't know what to do with this clip. Are you putting it at the beginning? Are you putting it on something else?
Let's say I'm putting it in pre the music. Jesus Christ.
Music.
Oh, enjoy the podcast, everyone.
No, I see what you mean about noises, though.
Yeah, it's a good noise.
It's like certain smells. The smell of a new book. Fucking hell.
There's just certain noises that are very satisfying. Yeah. I don't know what it is. Like, I remember we watched a movie. I can't remember what movie it was, but it was like an old movie. It was like a 90s or 80s movie. And it had a bunch of like what they imagined computers, like really advanced computers might sound like in like the late 80s, early 90s. And it was like, it was like the best noises. They were so dumb. I remember me and Annie just loving the noises.
I got one. When you open a sealed jar.
Oh, that's sort of suctiony.
Yeah.
Yep. That's a good noise too. That is a good noise.
Great noise.
Anyway, enjoy the podcast, everyone. Cue the music. Hello and welcome to Analysing Avatar. Today we're sitting down to take a look at The Beach, an episode where, for those of you who don't remember, I mean, I'd be amazed if this one really needed an intro, but it's the episode where all the Fire Nation gang, the teens, all head to Ember Island, to the beach, somewhere they used to go sort of on holiday when they were young, and it kind of brings up a bunch of their own interpersonal issues. That's the A story, which is very good. It's not really got a plot as such. It just sort of develops as it goes. We'll talk about the details in a bit. There is a B plot. This week doesn't include Zuko, but is the opposite way around. So it includes Aang, where Aang basically is attacked by the assassin hired by Zuko at the end of the previous episode. The guy that can make explosions from his head, which is pretty cool. So yeah, that's the reminder of the episode. Joined as always by Chris. How you feeling, Chris?
I'm good. I love that we're just ignoring that exchange about noises. I find that very amusing.
I was giving myself options, Chris. Maybe in the edit, I'd feel like that was just self-indulgent to include. I thought, you know what, I'm gonna pretend that didn't happen.
I feel like you should put it as well on Nothing But Static. Put it in the folder of like, this could be an end bit if we don't have one.
Yeah. Dear Lord.
I may have to switch my. I've got a pair of. I think it's fine. I've got a pair of headphones that just keep connecting and reconnecting, which means they just keep going boop, boop. Like,
is that not
really
the
annoying.
low battery warning? The beeping?
No, because the low battery warning is just and also I checked the other day, and because I thought that, and then I was like, oh, I've got like 70%. I got a backup pair here. We'll see what happens, Dan. I'm good.
Why do headphone manufacturers do that though? I understand a battery warning, right? But okay, so it sounds like yours is the same as mine. Does yours talk to you when your battery's low? Because mine, when my battery's low, interrupts whatever I'm listening to with a battery level low. And I'm like, it took you longer to do that, and I missed what was being said in the thing I was listening to. How about just a fucking beep? Beep.
No,
Go on.
Mine just does the beep, but it basically goes from 0 to 100. Like, the beep starts at 10%, and then suddenly, like, 3 minutes later, after beeping, it's gone. Yep. And I'm like, well, I mean, the battery on these things lasts longer than 30 minutes. Like, so I clearly didn't have 10%, did I?
Yeah. Well, that's the same with, it's like phones do the same thing, don't they? It's the technology that estimates how much battery you've got left is awful, generally speaking. And as the battery degrades, that technology sort of gets worse. And so with any laptop, phone, headphones, as your battery naturally degrades as it goes through its life cycle, the ability to accurately predict what you've got turns to shit, basically.
Yeah.
Anywho, so it's the beach. I assume you watched this one this morning, Chris. So you've just finished seeing it.
I watched it last night, and then I rewatched it this morning.
Oh, interesting. You don't normally watch them twice. Was that because it was a particularly good one, or you just felt like you needed to see it again to take it all in?
Part of a bit of the second, a bit of I usually tend to, if I've watched it the night before and I tend to find an excuse to watch it again in the morning, because I usually watch them just before. So whenever I don't watch them just before, I feel like my mind is going to forget.
Right.
I'll be so distracted from simply sleeping that I won't then look. Whilst Jess was cooking me a birthday breakfast of a sausage sandwich,
I wasn't sure if we were going to bring up your birthday, because it is Chris's birthday today, mind. Which I've already sang. I already sang him a happy birthday.
That was beautiful. One of my favourite noises.
Yeah, but I wasn't sure if because this podcast won't go out until like.
Oh yeah, it won't be my birthday when people hear this. But
yeah,
that's fine.
It's February. It's a month away.
So, Oh, and I wasn't trying to be like, wish me happy birthday in the comments, because it's not going to be my birthday.
Yeah, that's why I wasn't sure if we'd bring it up because of the delay. But it's Chris's birthday.
Literally the simple act of opening a Harry Potter puzzle made me go, oh, what if I now forget about the contents of the Avatar episode? That puzzle, mate. I'm not looking, mate.
That sounds like a good Christmas present. Birthday present.
Did a Back to the Future jigsaw over Christmas. Fucking, it really affected my mental health. Because so much of it was the same color, or just fucking stars. Like, don't you hate that? Like, the logo was a pain in the ass because it goes from, I don't know how much you've studied that logo, but it goes from like red to yellow to red, but you don't know which bit. Oh, mate, fucking hell. Anyway, and then we finished it and we're missing a bit.
No, how is that possible?
Yeah. I don't know if that's like us, like because
having lost it in the process.
Yeah, or if it wasn't in there, or what. Like, I did move the pieces around, because I made the mistake of starting it the day after we got our booster jabs, or the day of getting our booster jabs, and it just felt a bit like woozy. And like, it turns out, if you take something which can make your muscles feel a bit sore, don't like sit in a position which means you're leaning over a puzzle for 4 hours.
Yeah.
Fucking exasperated. Anyway, so I've rewatched it. In answer to your question, here's the thing. Yeah, we should crack on, man. 7 minutes of this shit so far. Right, here's the problem, Dan. If we were just this episode for me is classic. This is the problem with doing a podcast on a show, because if I was just watching this show and I watched this episode, literally my reaction at the end would be, oh, it was good, bit different. All right, cool. Next episode. But if I have to talk about it for 40 minutes, I'm just going to sound negative, because there were elements that I just didn't personally gel with. And I get, if you're a fan of this episode, if you're like, it's fun, I imagine this episode is relatively polarizing. I don't know that for sure. But if you go in, it's a lot of fun. We get to see a bit more about, the Fire Nation guys. We get to see into them a bit more. We get a bit more depth there. It's a slight spoof on, teen movies. Like, if you have fun with this, cool. And again, I had fun with it. Like, I don't disagree with any of those things. But I also found myself going, I didn't really want this. Like, at no point was I like, oh, it'd be really fun if we see the gang play volleyball for a bit. Like, if we do this weird thing where we kind of humanize the villains, but then at the end remind the audience that they are dickheads and are the villains. So you're in this weird position of, well, I'm not really sure what that did. And I think my big thing is just the fire scene at the end, where it's just exposition after exposition. And I tend to always I really like the Power Rangers movie, but the scene where they basically did the same thing, sat around a fire and took it in turns to tell their story. I had a real issue with the Suicide Squad, the James Gunn one, because I felt like the scene on the bus was literally just, now we're going to sit down and tell our stories. And I just think, like, it just felt a bit too expositional. Like, I almost wish they'd zeroed in on one character or two characters. All of them going, well, your problem is this. Well, your problem is this. Just felt a bit too ham-fisted to me. But that's if I have to, do you know what I mean? Analyze it for ages.
Yeah. So, like, it's a really interesting position. I'm a little surprised. I thought this was going to be a home run, because I absolutely love this episode. It's
and
one of my... go on.
And it's right up my street. Like, I absolutely get it, because I watched it going, Dan's going to be like, oh, Chris is going to love this. And I did really enjoy it, but part of me also had some real issues with it.
Do you think part of it is like last season syndrome, where any episode that kind of diverts from the goal? Because obviously, going into a last season, what you're sitting down excited about, presumably, and I literally mean presumably, is you're excited to get the conclusion to the story, right? You know you've only got 20 episodes worth of screen time to do it. I know it plays out differently because the final one's kind of like... the final few episodes are one story, but you know you've only got a certain number of episodes time-wise to get that story done. Do you think there's maybe an element of reacting to diversions because it's not really pushing that grander story forward? Or do you think it's just not particularly well executed? Because do you think if maybe, because like you talked about the campfire scene at the end and it being a bit forced, if that had been done better and like for you and really like nailed it, would that have made you more forgiving of it in terms of it being a bit expositional, a bit like sort of a side episode almost? I don't know. I'm just trying to sort of trying to get to the bottom of where because for example, if this episode had been somewhere in season 2, would you have had the same reaction to it? Maybe.
Possibly not. I think it is more the second one for me. I think I just didn't like the execution of that scene on the beach. And not with all of them. Like, I have to say that, and obviously I can't remember names, but I thought the stuff with Zuko, and the name of the flirty, playful girl. What's her name?
Ty Lee.
Ty Lee. I thought the Ty Lee stuff was great, and I think almost, and you know, anyone sat there going, well, they didn't really focus on Zuko's sister, so it's only then Zuko's girlfriend, whose name is...
May. Sorry.
May, sorry. It's so... I knew. That's the other thing, I think. Part of me, Dan, is watching this episode going, fucking hell, there's no way I'm going to remember everyone's names. To the point where I meant to bring up a description to, like, remember. I think there is some really good stuff there, but it just builds to a point where they're just pointing at each other and either saying, this is your problem or this is my problem. And I think if there had just been a bit less of that, like I say, focus on Ty Lee and maybe Zuko, or maybe have the Zuko stuff a bit subtle, like he sees it, his sister sees it, May sees it, but no one really addresses it, and you know it's this bubbling pot that at some point might boil over or something. You know, I think it's the fact that they tried to make it, and you know, even like to me, the beginning where the sisters, and there's some great moments of comedy in this episode. Again, I didn't dislike it. It's just, if I have to really sit and think about it, I'm like, the sisters at the beginning, it felt like they're sat there at the beginning going, it's a mystical beach which makes you really find and reveal yourself, is to justify the exposition dump and the fireplace scene. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I really love this episode. I do understand that criticism, and I think it is valid. Like, even when I watch it and I'm enjoying it, I am like, it'll just come out. Like, it's just like, now we're all going to sit around and describe what our problem is one by one. Ty Lee, you first. Like, it just, it is literally one by one. What for me, that explanation does just cover it, kind of. Not, I know it's like pretty lazy as it goes to just be like, oh, it's a magical beach. You'll learn something about yourself when you're on this beach. I do agree that's super like lazy, but it's enough for me to just go, fine, it's the beach, whatever. Like, I don't know why. Like, in my head, I'm just like, because they also kind of, for me, they earn it with like the content of the episode first. It's not like it's just a normal episode where none of that stuff's being explored, and then at the end they all sit around and have that conversation. I think the reason it doesn't bother me so much is because, especially on a second viewing, or a viewing having already seen the episode before, for me, I'm seeing the episode explore the stuff they discuss at the end prior to that. It's all being sort of set up and dealt with, quite naturally. So the fact that it all comes up at the end is like, well, yeah, it makes sense. They've just all gone through like a sequence of events that kind of force them all to reckon with certain elements of themselves, and and that's kind of kind of why I enjoy it, because I just like this idea that, like, they're gonna, especially because we've got characters we haven't really spent a lot of time with personally, especially in May and Ty Lee. I mean, Zuko, we've had plenty of character development for. We didn't necessarily need Zuko's one, which is why I think his is basically the shortest. But they use this to really help characterize Azula. I think Azula, for sure, is the character that gains the most out of this episode. But I liked learning about the others too. And in terms of the sort of the criticism, I'd very quickly wrap up this because if I don't, I'll never say it. For me, like, because they spend the episode doing the build up for all of it, like, it feels earned enough to go, yeah, fine. That's why they're all thinking about the things they're thinking about and are moody about those things, and why it all sort of comes up right at the end. Which is, again, between that and the whole mystical beach excuse, like, I'm just like, okay, yeah, it tracks enough that I'm willing to go with it. Because also, I'm just so excited to get a story with these characters at the forefront. Zuko, as I mentioned at the beginning, is always the B plot, and also a reminder that they're just teenagers. Because we're always reminded about the gang being young, always, but it's so easy to forget that the villains are also quite young too. And having this episode and showing them deal with like teenage problems, like being invited to a party and being socially awkward and not being able to talk to a guy, like, it's just super. For me, it's super enlightening for the characters, and that's like, what I'm like. I get way more invested in stuff if the thing puts the time into doing the character work, and I really enjoy the character work in this episode, and I do forgive it the clunkiness of the beach scene for the reasons that I just mentioned there. So there you go.
I don't know if Zuko is sort of the one that gets the least, because he gets the least in the first half of the episode. He's just sort of grumpy and the jealous boyfriend, but then he goes to the old house, he burns the picture, and he really sort of breaks down on the beach at the end. In my head, the Azula is the interesting one, because Azula has been so strong and villainous that I like the notion that, fundamentally she wants to be liked, and she doesn't know how to be social, and the scene where she's like, we can rule the world as the most powerful couple, and the dude's like, the cutback to the guy's face is so funny. Like, it's such a, like, it's such a great animation choice. Like, it's almost a different style of animation to what the show usually does.
Yeah.
And it really lands for that reason. But I really hope that if we're going to go, because there's something powerful about, your villains being villains and not really seeing the human side. And if we're going to see the human side of Azula, great, but that better come back. Because, you know what I mean? Like, we better see that again. That better go somewhere, because you've introduced it for this episode, and because they didn't really then, she ultimately literally concludes, oh, well, it's great, I'm a psychopath, that's cool. Like, because she concludes it that way, you kind of go, are we going to come back to this? And if we're not going to come back to that, I don't know if it was better to just keep her as a pure kind of villain, because I'd rather my villains have more layers than that, obviously, but not for one episode. If you're going to give that layer, let's see it more, and the episode didn't give the impression that we were going to explore that more. And obviously I trust the writers, and the writers are brilliant and, more genius than I'll ever be, so presumably it is coming back. But it didn't feel like it was from the episode. And it felt like the first half of the episode is Azula and May's story, with Ty Lee being the thing that represents what Azula doesn't have. And then the second half of the episode is Zuko and Ty Lee's story.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I would agree with that sort of conclusion, like in terms of just like how they divide it. But I do find it interesting because from my perspective, I always kind of thought like, oh, well, it's good to get anything for Azula because she always keeps a card so close to the chest. There's a moment of vulnerability here that is very, I think, telling in that in the moment she basically says, oh, I didn't care anyway, but our mother didn't like me as much as she liked Zuko or whatever. And I that really stuck out to me the first time I watched this episode, because it is interesting to think that actually Zuko and Azula have a lot more in common than they thought. Zuko never wasn't able to sort of have that like relationship with his dad, and he always kind of felt that he obviously preferred Azula to him, and him getting to sort of realize maybe, and her getting to express even in a small way that that she might be in the exact same position but the other way around. Like, I mean, when she says my own mother thought I was a monster, she plays it off as, I don't care, it's fine, whatever, I'm a nutcase, like, whatever. She kind of plays it off as like, this doesn't affect me. But the very act of bringing it up in the way that she does kind of makes me feel like the opposite is probably true.
And the way the camera zooms in on the fire and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
She bookends it with statements to try and deflate the honesty in it. But I always kind of see the honesty in it as being the honesty in it. And I'm not going to say whether it does or doesn't come back, but from my perspective, first time watching it for sure, I don't think I really minded that it might not, because she's such a closed off character. I was like, even getting that one moment of vulnerability does help and will contribute to how I think and feel about that character going forward, regardless regardless as to whether they specifically have her discuss it again in future or not.
But I think I don't even mind if it's not discussed. I just want it to inform things. It feels like
right.
I worry it's not going to inform anything. Like all of Zuko's. I am saying that right, aren't I? Yeah. All of Zuko's vulnerabilities inform his character. And what an episode 2 do that with. All of Zuko's vulnerabilities inform his character, and I think Azula's inform her character in that we know that context is now there, but I don't think you need to. I would worry that you could. Here it is. I would worry that with the Azula of it all, you could you could skip this episode and just not know they're there, not have the context, not see any hints of it. And I'd much rather, if we're going to explore vulnerabilities, be ones that are embedded more throughout, like with Zuko, and actually May as well. Like, I could have given a guess of May's vulnerabilities even before this episode based on the other episodes. I don't feel that way about the stuff we explored with Azula here. Hopefully I will going forward, and that'll be great. But I think, and again, what we're talking about is fundamentally in 22 minutes, they tried to explore some pretty rich stuff with all four of these characters. We know Zuko's mad at himself. There's a bit of like joy of seeing Azula try and tease that out of him, and her being the master manipulator. That's always fun and interesting to see. But if that had just been bubbling still, we don't need Zuko in this episode pointing at his face and going, most people are worried about their terrible skin, but my father did this to my face, like, or whatever he says. And I think maybe if we par the Zuko stuff back more, can we explore Azula, May, and Ty Lee in a bit more depth? Or maybe you get rid of some of the comedy, because it does sort of switch. Like, it's a teenage teen comedy for, 15 minutes, however long it is until they leave the party. And then it's, a teen drama, a YA novel exploring themes. Maybe you pair one back, I don't know. And again, that's not really a criticism, because that's probably what they wanted it to be. And that's cool.
Right, you're right. I think that's exactly what the intent is. I mean, it's so deliberately hilarious until it isn't. And that is in its own way a why thing. I read somewhere that this episode was mildly inspired by The Breakfast Club, and that makes a lot of sense. Like, it is, it's a comedy that has some heart attached. That particularly starts to explore that stuff as it goes forward, and it starts almost purely funny and then becomes serious the more you learn about the people. So that is definitely the intention. And I don't know if they would ever have pared back the ratio, because I think it is one of those things where it's like, for me, because they're embedding some of the character stuff into the comedy moments.
That's fair.
Like, Azula's inability to connect with other people sort of manifests as this inability to talk to guys or whatever. Seeing her be awkward with other teenagers when she's so confident master manipulator the rest of the time, it really does help set up the stuff that she goes through at the end. Like, I mean, god damn. I mean, sure, I tell you, we'll do it, Chris. An old segment we used to have on Fringe Observers, for those who don't know, was Dan's quote of the week.
Well, hold on. Whoa.
Which came with a little intro from Chris.
If you're going to give a quote of the week, Dan, we need to give
Oh yeah, don't worry, Chris. I was giving you the space. You were getting the time. So I did write down a quote this week that was so good, that I love so much, that I was like, you know what? I think it's worth bringing back Dan's quote of the week. So Chris, cue me up for Dan's quote of the week.
Brown, brown. Brown, bada, brown, bada, brown, bada, brown, bada, da, 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 brown, 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 brown. Dan's quote of the week.
Hi, it's Dan, and welcome to Quote of the Week. This week, my quote of the week is, "That's a sharp outfit, Chan. Careful, you could puncture the hull of an Empire-class Fire Nation battleship, leaving thousands to drown at sea, because it's so sharp."
That was very good.
That quote, I literally, every time I watch this episode, have to pause it there. It's fucking absurd. It's so absurd. And I love that whenever her character throughout the episode gains confidence and doesn't act like an awkward, crazy person, it's when she's dropping the facade and letting the insane warlord that she is come through. The most confident she comes across in this episode is when they are winning the volleyball, and she's like, you'll be destroyed for all time, and she's like, giving like a victory speech like she'd give as she burns the, an Earth Nation village to the ground. Do you know what I mean? And it's just a volleyball game. Like, for me, all the comedy is setting up the stuff that we cover at the end, and I think if you peeled it back, you would lose something. I think.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't know how I feel about the answer to this question. I don't know, but I'm going to chuck it out there. Whilst that is comedy, and it's great comedy,
yes,
does it moving forward harm how threatening the character seems?
That's a very good question. See, my gut reaction is no. But, she is... Because so far she's been so cold and calculating in everything we've seen her in. Like, we complimented how they wrote her a couple of episodes ago.
Which I think is why it jars for me. Yeah.
Because we were talking about how brilliant of a tactician she was when she'd sussed out that maybe Zuko hadn't quite finished off the Avatar, and she was sort of setting him up for a fall by letting him take credit. She's always playing 4D chess, Azula. And that's kind of like one of the things that's so great about her character, So yeah, you got to wonder if showing her as being awkward. No, I think the reason they get away with it is because I think it is just that this isn't her world. I think this is how they do it, because I'm going back through my mind going, do I ever, when I rewatch the later half of this season, feel Azula weakened from this? And I don't think I do, and I think the reason is they very clearly make it here that when she's in her comfort zone, a world where she can be the manipulative, cunning, tactician despot that she is, that's when she's just being herself and completely fine. The reason she struggles here is because being a normal teenager is so far away from what she's been allowed to be that she's having to fake it. And having to fake that is just... Having to fake being normal is beyond her abilities. She's, give her a Fire Nation fleet to command, and she may very well be able to take down Ba Sing Se, But ask her to attend a party and talk to a boy, she's like, I don't know how to do this. So I think it's because it's different tasks.
Maybe.
Like, it's different things, it's different worlds. She's grown up with her father in war rooms, learning that. That's all her life has really been. Preparing, continuing this war. And if anything, I think it actually gives the character a lot more depth to know that, socially speaking, if she was actually trying to impress someone, she would struggle.
Yeah, and it does. I absolutely... And I think that's why I struggle with it, because it absolutely does add depth, and it is interesting, and I like it as a concept. I think the thing that I keep bumping up against, and the thing that makes me go... Is this coming back? Is it connecting? I want it to, but I'm not sure it will. Is because all the other vulnerabilities explored, Zuko not knowing what's right and what's wrong anymore and what he can do. Yes. Ty Lee wanting to feel unique and wanting to feel separate to her siblings and yes. powerful. May always being told to be quiet and
sort of bottling herself up.
So bottling herself up. I can see and get excited for all the ways in which those vulnerabilities can come into play later. Does it mean that Zuko's going to turn around and do the right thing? Does it mean that Ty Lee is going to go, wait, I've gone from fitting into one family to fitting into another. Actually, you're just using me. I'm in no better situation than I was when I'm growing up. I'm out of here. May exploding and just letting out all her rage, and either that being right. against the Fire Nation or against the Aang and the gang. I don't know the Azula of it all. I'm there going, how's that coming back? Do you know what I mean? Like, and if it does, it might not be as clean. The mum stuff, definitely. The mum stuff, absolutely. But the majority of this episode is not dedicated to the mum stuff. It's dedicated to the social awkwardness. Now, maybe the social awkwardness comes from the mum stuff. I absolutely get that. But I think...
yeah, well, because it comes through, like, it's the difference, isn't it, between her and Zuko, is he grew up with his mother trying to give him somewhat of a normal life, and she kind of grew up not, with her mother sort of maybe... unfairly, maybe, sometimes we give up on people too soon in life, I think, and it feels a little bit like her mother did do that to her, the same way that Zuko's dad did that to Zuko, neither parent perfect in this case. Obviously, one didn't go to the trouble of scarring their child literally as well as figuratively, but, you're right. So the social awkwardness comes from the fact that she dedicated herself to that side of her family's life, So I do think it is linked, but you're right. It's not as clean at all. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you while you were mid flow.
No, it's fine, there doesn't seem to be as many obvious routes to link it back going forward.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that is genuinely fair. So, well, I guess we'll have to. That's a sort of we'll have to put a pin in that, I guess, because it's a kind of a wait and see thing. With that out of the equation, because I think we've been on that for quite some time in terms of the podcast. I do think it's an interesting discussion topic, but I just think we're going to end up going in circles. I think if we're to wrap that element of the discussion up, I think you're right. I do think there's a concern to be had there. It doesn't particularly bother me, but I do understand that Azula specifically, the vulnerability they give her is less cleanly going to work its way into the future. That's a really good way to phrase it, actually. Particularly pointing out how you could see the other three working into it. So looking at some of the other stuff that's in the episode, let's because we didn't really talk about, like, we that was very Azula focused. Like, Ty Lee and May, do you think, like, do you think that was needed? Because I think there's some people that would maybe argue that, like, two characters that have just kind of existed to, like, sort of back up Azula, the girl squad, whatever. Do they need that much characterization? I personally was very excited to see them get some screen time and get to know them a little bit better. It's a big part of why I love this episode, because it's just when else are you fitting that in? You're just not unless you do something like this. So I get a lot out of their sort of what we learn about them in this episode, because we know nothing about either of their pasts. So learning that May was an only child but had a very controlling mother that kind of forced her to, don't speak unless you're spoken to, and sort of, forced her to not express herself, put her in a box, and that's led to her being very sort of closed off, which makes her relationship with Zuko difficult. I think Ty Lee's one's a little bit less interesting, but it does inform her character. It does kind of, because the implication I think we get when Azula fetches her from the circus is that maybe Azula scared her off and made her go to the circus. Like, it feels like almost she was running away from Azula in that episode, because they do that whole thing where Azula sets the net on fire. And Ty Lee's all nervous about doing it. But yeah, it seems that it's more to do with her own family stuff. But I think we get a lot. I get a lot out of getting that opportunity to explore those characters, and I just don't know where else you would do it. So the episode has a lot of value for me, even just in that, because you could get Azula's plot development from this episode or Zuko's into any other episode, no problem. They're often the focus. So how did you feel a bit about that element of it?
Yeah, I really liked it. Like I say, I thought the Ty Lee of it all was one of the strongest elements of the episode, because it had a real ABC. Like, it had a real not arc in the sense that it concluded, but you saw her actions. We dig into them a bit more. We get them compared to someone else's actions. We find out why there are actions. That to me was really interesting. I think Ty Lee was and again, I can see it informing stuff that I've already seen and stuff we're going to see, and that, Ty Lee's almost the character I came out most engaged with in this episode. Right. The May of it all, it has to be connected to the Zuko. So part of me goes, is May too connected to the Zuko of it all, but then actually her past is informing how she is with him, so it makes sense. And I think, would I have preferred maybe just a solo May thing, or maybe the whole episode is about them? Yeah, maybe. But I think it's done well. I think for me, I really like that. The most interesting elements of this episode for me are May and Ty Lee. Ty Lee especially, I think, has done really well.
Yeah. How do we haven't really covered this. It's actually kind of amazing that this hasn't properly been a discussion point. How do we feel that it sounds horrible, but they just kind of gave Zuko a girlfriend this season? We've not really talked about it. Literally, when they were watching the previously on, they have that bit where Zuko's with May on the beach, or not a beach, like somewhere in the previous episode, somewhere kind of scenic, and he's talking to her about how strongly he feels for her and stuff, and I'm just going, we haven't discussed this at all on the podcast. Like, we've completely just glossed over the fact they just gave Zuko a girlfriend this season, and obviously it's a character that was previously established. And they'd already previously established her feelings for Zuko, so it all makes sense. But it's just, we just literally haven't mentioned it. Like, do you think it was a good move, bad move? How are you feeling about it so far in terms of his character development?
Again, sort of embodies one of the reasons this episode makes me kind of go, huh, is because I've really liked it. I've liked the subtlety of it, though. I've liked that, them cuddling up on a beach maybe isn't that subtle, but it's not like we saw a lot of scenes of that, and when we did see them, they were together. And then sort of they kissed and they get interrupted by Azula, and then they're together in front of Azula, and it's cool, and it was kind of like subtle and there, and part of his, representing that he really did on the surface have everything he wanted. He was welcomed back into the Fire Nation, he got the girl, but that sort of internal struggle. So I really like it. It didn't scream boyfriend, girlfriend, jealous of other guys talking to her at a party storyline to me. But that is what is so glorious and odd about this episode. It suddenly becomes a teen rom-com. And I know we've covered that point, but it's connected because I never really, in this episode, it is absolutely played as, you are absolutely right. And even in the previous episodes, you'd be absolutely right to say, Zuko's got a girlfriend. I didn't really view it as Zuko's got a girlfriend. I viewed it as, Zuko and May are sort of together. But this episode, because it's so teen comedy, teen drama, really positions it as Zuko and May are having relationship difficulties. And it's not, if you'd have said to me, the next episode deals with Zuko and May's relationship difficulties, this is not what I would have pictured.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Because you'd have expected it to be about her starting to get a sense that he's maybe conflicted about his choice back in Ba Sing Se. You'd imagine it to be sort of linked to some of the overall character stuff. Yeah, I 100% agree. And it is interesting that this episode really does remove them from their situations to explore this stuff, because you could argue, and I think this is a reasonable position to take, that this episode suffers for its choice to remove them from their circumstances. I personally like that because we get a lot of fun, weird stuff that we just wouldn't get any other time. Like I said, seeing them just being teenagers is one of the joys of this episode for me, because it's just sometimes you forget these characters are teenagers. It's really easy to forget that they're going through a lot of stuff. It was easier with like a Steven universe to remember how young Steven is, or even when we're seeing the other side of this story, because Aang is obviously still very much a child. But they're on the cusp of adulthood, so it's sometimes very easy to forget how young they are, and having a good reminder of that is a really powerful thing, I think. But you're right, removing them from their overall plots. Like, you could have done this story and had them back in their normal Fire Nation situation, like dealing with this stuff, and it would have maybe been more connected to the overall plot. Like I said, the Zuko, if you were going to give Zuko and May some sort of trouble, you'd have maybe made it about his doubts, and that way it all links back together. But I kind of don't mind this episode steps out personally, but I would absolutely understand somebody making that argument. But then, Azula trying to be normal but not is just the most entertaining thing. I I will say as well, you know, one thing I really liked about this episode, which is really a bit random, when Azula basically admits to Ty Lee she's a little jealous of the attention she gets, which I thought was another weird moment of vulnerability. And Ty Lee gives her a tip, and she's like, "Oh, just always laugh at what they say." And Azula, like, has this genius moment of feeling degraded by it, where she goes, "Isn't that super shallow?" And Ty Lee's like, "Yeah, but it works." And it does. And it's like, there's just something kind of brilliant about what that's saying about social interaction in general. Like, forgetting the show for a minute. Like, the message behind that is kind of brilliant. And because that is a lot of what the episode is about as well, is like the masks that we put up, you know, when we're doing social interaction, sometimes when it's people we're not as familiar with, you know, with our friends, with the people we know, we let these things go. But, you know, when you meet a group of new people, you know, I think everyone has a kind of like a default shield version of themselves they put up that's like, it is still themselves, but it's like guarded in some way, you know, certain aspects, like you don't know if you're, how safe you are to be 100% yourself in front of like a brand new person. You know, I always try to be as authentic as I can when I meet new people, but I sometimes, you know, find myself sort of like curbing like maybe my nerdiness. Like, you know, like someone will mention a TV show or something and I won't go into full crazy analysis mode. You know, I is that 100% honest? No, because that's what I think I would do in a given situation if I was 100% at ease. But I'm not going to bombard some poor bastard that doesn't know me with that stuff. You know what I mean?
Completely.
So this episode sort of looking at that in a sort of subtle way. I think there's also a good message in there for young people as well about maybe being more honest and being more yourself. And like, I don't know. Then again, maybe that's the opposite of the message this episode gives, because she gets to kiss the guy when she's being fake, but when she's herself at the end, and she's like, as a couple, we will rule the beach, and he's like, and runs away. I guess the message they're trying to communicate there is don't be yourself. Maybe not intentional, but that's accidentally what they communicate.
In general, the messages of this episode are odd for me. You've got to just kind of run with it, because the happy ending is them trashing some poor dude's party.
And they laugh at that every time, though. Every time it cuts from them all being moody on the beach to smashing his place up to then this like to that photograph or painting or whatever it is of them all like happily arm in arm.
The photo is doing the sort of happy beach memories, like it's doing the sort of, you know what I mean, like summer vacation with mates thing. But they are villains, and they have just done a bad thing. Do you think the? And I don't want to get into weird areas with this, but I'm gonna raise it in case people have thought it themselves and are hoping we raise it. Do you think? While it's nice to see them as teenagers, do you not think it's also jarring as well? The bit that really got me was when they're playing volleyball and like Ty Lee and May are kicking ass, and we cut to the dudes on the beach looking at them, just like, I was like, this is fucking not what I expected to be watching in Avatar this morning. Like, do you know what I mean? We haven't seen anything like that in the show. To suddenly see guys, topless dudes trying to flirt with our lead villains was just like a little jarring. It was like,
well, we did it a little bit with Zuko too. You know, we did they do that bit where Zuko like takes off his jacket and like all the birds fly behind him, and then they cut to the girls who are all wide-eyed and like, you know, I didn't find that too jarring, because I think it's a product of moving to a slightly older group of lead characters,
and that I love. Yes. I have to say that because part of me, I was like, is it jarring? And then I was like, well, it's probably slightly jarring for me because I've watched it all in a year, and I'm sort of a set age. If I was watching this as a young sort of, if I started Avatar 12, 13, and this was taking place 3 years later when I'm, 15, 16, I think that was fucking brilliant. The fact that they like take a shot Harry Potter, age the characters with the audience is actually brilliant and something so rare. I was like, well, whilst it's jarring, actually I do respect that decision and kind of think it's genius, because I've never seen it before.
What's funny is they haven't strictly aged the characters. Remember, less than a year has passed in the show. What they've done is just switch to the older group of characters. Because obviously, Aang and Toph are both very young. Katara's kind of in the middle. Zuko is closer to the age of, Ty Lee, Zuko, and that gang. Which is why I always found it funny when they did that thing where Ty Lee kind of thinks Sokka's kind of cute. She's always like, hello, hi, with him, or whenever they interact, which I always think is really funny. So what's genius about this is they've done it without doing it, because strictly speaking, the show is on a timeline, and that timeline was that year. He had to learn all the elements very quickly. So a lot of time has not passed. We're talking months, not years. So what they've done is switch to the older group of characters to get this in. And you're right, it still works, and that's genius.
As we discussed last week, though, they have also done it with Aang's gang. Like, their Fire Nation get-ups are inherently more adult and teenage than their other costumes.
Right. Yeah, there's a truth to that too. Yeah, for sure. I think what's interesting about that, actually, and we might as well, I'll hint on this now because it's a bit of the trivia, but apparently the original designs for the swimsuits for the girls in this episode were Nickelodeon Standards and Practices Division decided they were a little too sexy for Nick, and they had to be redrawn. Now, that piece of trivia I was dubious about, because I couldn't imagine the creators of this show maybe going that far. And then I thought, you know what it probably was? It probably wasn't that they were too far. It's just that, very sensitive people at Nick, And there was a link to the source for the where this story was, and I thought maybe it would have a quote from the creators or something like that. So I clicked on the link, and it didn't work, and which is very frustrating for me, because you know what I'm like. I like to verify my verify my triv. So I was hoping to find an interview or something linked there on the wiki that would do it. And then I reached for my phone to Google it and chose not to. Because it occurred to me...
I was going to say, don't do that,
It occurred to me... Yeah, I had a moment of just like, I'd like to verify if they've talked about this in an interview or in, some sort of, maybe a Comic-Con panel or something. And then I went, oh no, that Google is going to lead to some very, very strange results that I do not want. And I put my phone back down. I was like, no, I'm good. I think I'll just go without that information. So, unfortunately, that is a piece of trivia I have, but I honestly can't confirm if it's actually accurate or not. But I must admit, I imagine if those designs are out there, and I don't know, again, I won't be looking, I imagine they're not bad. I imagine they're probably, because it's still, they're not idiots, the guys who make this show, right? Like, there's...
Yeah, I can't, but I also can't... I can't imagine what we... I can't... In order for it to be bad, it would have to be, like, really bad. And like you say, what animator would do that? So I'm with you. Right. The only thing I can think is that it wouldn't have been that bad, but Nickelodeon were like, no. So maybe like the bottoms are like skirt things. Maybe the bottoms were like bikini bottoms. Maybe.
Right, yeah, which I guess
and that made Nickelodeon go,
yeah, something like that.
Nah.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, I think it's interesting, and you're right about them like dressing the characters up.
Zuko's got like some tiny speedos.
Well, funnily enough, this trivia doesn't mention Zuko.
Oh, it's only specifically talking about the women,
the three girls. And that is, I think that does say something about a certain double standard with like these things. Like, they're always a little more sensitive about that sort of thing when it's female characters. But yeah, I was hoping. It's a shame this website doesn't work anymore, because it's the only link I felt safe clicking on with it, because it's the source for the triv. So I assume, like I said, interview of some sort. But unfortunately, it doesn't work. So I'll never know. If someone else wants to take the hit for me to verify this trivia and then like tell me the findings, if someone else is willing to do the Googling on that, feel free. But I'm definitely not taking the chance.
We all know what Dad's asking for there. Some fan art. Send Dan the fan
That's very
artist.
much the no, Chris. That's the exact thing I'm trying to avoid.
I know.
That is the very opposite of what I want. If I didn't mind seeing the fan art, Chris, I would have been quite happy to investigate this further.
I really hope that doesn't exist, but it will, won't it?
Of course it exists. Of course that exists. I know the internet too well. Anyway, so to another couple of quick notes, bits before we get to the actual full triv. Let's talk a little bit about the Aang side of things. It's not a big plot, but I do like it because it gives the episode a bit of action, which it doesn't otherwise have. For those who don't remember the details, it's Aang gets spotted while swimming by two very amusing Fire Nation sort of like goons who are like, we've got the most boring job in the Fire Nation. Nothing ever happens. And then the Avatar drops in front of them. And they're like, we better tell someone. So they get a messenger hook with the message, and they're sending it to the Fire Nation, which is then stopped by Zuko's hired assassin, basically under the idea of, I guess, Zuko hired him to hush up Aang's existence and then stop Aang's existence to cover it up fully. And then he goes and finds Aang and the gang, who are peacefully sleeping until attacked, and there's a sort of an action sequence and they barely escape. It's not a lot to it, doesn't do anything for the characters or whatever. It's very, very thin, but it is a really fucking awesome action sequence. And that, I think Toph in this describes him, he gets a sort of name later on, but they've not done that in the show yet, so we'll just call him, as Toph refers to him here, a sort of metal man. How did you feel about Metal Man and the whole action sequence? I personally, I love the visual and the sound of the thingy. But how did you, of his whatever his weird power is? How do you feel about it?
I really liked the visual. Part of me, I'm gonna sound just like grumpy. You're like, Chris doesn't like getting older. That's what this is. Part of me was like, wow, in a world where we've got so many cool like element options. We've suddenly got some dude exploding things with his head. But all right, cool. I'm down with it. I think what I really liked about it was, whether consciously or not, I assume consciously, so many times in this show, I love the decision. Whilst I've had my nitpicks, the decision to flip it and make the Fire Nation gang the focus and Aang and the gang the B plot, I think is great. Fantastic. Happy with that. And I really like that sometimes with this show, with Zuko's side plots, we've gone, it'd be nice if we just had that a bit more. And it must have been so tempting, because it's our main characters, to give that more. But the decision to go, right, they're dicking around, they get caught, big battle, and it be that. And that's all it needs to be, and that's all it is. And literally to almost be like, well, I guess he's coming back again. Shit. Like, I just think they gave it the right amount of story. And I can imagine, again, that would frustrate some people. Like, some people's complaint will probably be, well, they had nothing to do. It was a bit jarring, them being flipped around. Get it. Understand that. For me, it was the perfect use of a B-plot. And I found it quite unique and fun that it was them in the B-plot, not Zuko, etc.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And again, an episode like this, it benefits from the action beat anyway. Even if it's a bit contextless, it's like a good way to like push Aang's story just a little bit forward in a way that makes perfect sense, because we set it up last week, without it needing... Like, it's the perfect level of B-plot for this episode, It can't be something that takes up too much time and has too much character stuff, because the whole point of this episode is to give the character stuff to the other side, right? So, something so thin, intentionally thin, and simplistic as the assassin catches up to the gang. Perfect. For me. Like, absolutely perfect. Give me a cool action beat. Give me an interesting, you're right, he's not the most interesting of, like, the villains, but it's a really cool effect. It looks and sounds really cool, and it's certainly a new challenge for them to try and overcome. Clear that that will continue. They barely escape. 100% love it. Also, Aang hidden in the rocks, where you can just see his eyes through that little envelope, is one of the coolest moments from the whole episode. Fucking love it. It's a great moment. So yeah, I'm a big fan. I think it's exactly what this episode needed if you were gonna do it, basically.
Obviously, we would never put a main character in Knobhead Hall of Fame, but Ang, I'm worried about your tattoos. Ah, don't be silly. We're surrounded by walls. It's fine. Hey, I'm going to jump in this mysterious slide, which is going to lead me to the wide open. Like, okay, Ang. Well, that was a bad move, buddy. If we're honest.
So Knobhead Hall of Fame.
No. We're not putting him in Knobhead Hall of Fame, but it was a Knobhead move,
sure?
wasn't it? Yeah, it was just a Knobhead move.
Well,
Ang's done worse stuff than that.
Alright, he's not getting added to the Hot Knobhead Hall of Fame. I was halfway through typing it, if I'm being honest with you, Chris.
No. It's just,
no, that did seem very, very ill-advised. But again, child. This is one of those things, isn't it? It's fits.
Yeah.
So, let's quickly... have I got any other notes? Let me just quickly check, because I feel like maybe I should. No, we've covered all of that. No, I think we've covered all the notes. Good. Okay, let's just get straight onto the triv then, Chris.
Let's triv it up!
I'm going to give you some trivia. I don't know why we both have a thing we say at the beginning of this now. At some point, I'm going to stop doing my one. But it's here to stay. I'm sorry for those of you who don't like it. I said it on an episode of Rewind Reviews, and I enjoy it. Anyway, so we've already covered one of the pieces of trivia for this episode, which is the them having to redraw the designs for the sort of swimwear for the episode. The other trivia I've got is the A story for the beach was originally intended to be a B story for another episode. However, as they wanted to flesh out some of the other characters in the sort of team, Zula's team particularly, the plan was changed to focus on them and push Aang and the gang back to the B plot. Very wise choice, I feel. The way that's phrased makes it sound like they'd already written an episode with beach elements in it. I think this is referring to the very early planning stages, and you're first sort of beating out what an episode can be. I don't think there was ever like a version of a script that was the other way round, if anyone's wondering. Just from my own sort of understanding of like how these development processes work, I'd be surprised to find out if they'd actually pen to paper for a script without having already decided who it was going to be dealing with. So I suspect we're just talking like the phase where you're sort of breaking the story, which is usually like a lot of people sat around having a conversation and putting like vague ideas on a board or on post-its. The episode, as I mentioned earlier, was influenced significantly by the film The Breakfast Club, which was used as reference material for the relationship-based plots for the Ember Island storyline. Dos Santos humorously apparently interjected the song "Don't You Forget About Me" across the ending on the original animatic when it cut to the picture at the end when it's the freeze frame. And obviously it's played at both ends of The Breakfast Club, and they played it during the animatic at the end of the beach stuff when they when they were doing the samples and putting it all together. That's very funny to me. I enjoy that.
Yeah, that's good.
So apparently Kate Matalia was chosen to write this episode because of her prior experience portraying Zuko's angsty teen personality while in a romantic situations. She had done, from the Tales of Ba Sing Se, she'd done the Tale of Zuko, the one where that's the one where he goes on the date and it goes a bit wrong. So she was the perfect person to write this episode because that was handled really well. Putting Zuko in a sort of awkward and romantic situation and sort of taking him away from his more like sort of capable villain stuff and sort of churning comedy out of that. Clearly, that was done very, very, clearly a very good choice as the writer for this episode. So according to the audio commentary, the beach sand is grey because it's volcanic ash. Basically, it's very similar to the black sand beaches that you get in volcanic regions around the world. We talked a lot about this last week, and in fact, the next piece of trivia is that on location. The location for the volcano where the Team Avatar are attacked is actually based on a volcanic crater that exists in Viti, which is a place in Iceland. And apparently Viti translates to hell. Before this season, I think we talked about this last week, the creative team, or parts of the creative team, went to Iceland to get inspiration for the what the Fire Nation would look like, because it would be volcanic and Iceland is volcanic. And it seems that they've taken multiple visual elements from that, so which is pretty cool.
That is cool.
So there's a scene that was shown at Anime Expo 2010 in which the sort of metal man actually kills the 2 soldiers whose message gets sent to the Fire Lord. The scene was deleted from the final episode. I think probably for 2 reasons. One, is it needed? I guess there is a vague thought of those 2 guys sell the Avatar and have sent a message. If he stops the message, won't they just send another one? Or talk to someone at some point and say, we saw the Avatar. Eventually that wouldn't completely keep it contained. So I understand the impulse from a storytelling perspective to show a scene of him stopping those 2 guys from being able to do that. But also, it is a Nickelodeon show, and showing him flat out just murder those 2 guys, is that too far?
Yeah, it is an issue. I'd thought of it. I was like, what about these 2 dudes just kicking around that know? But I don't think it's a big enough concern to do that with.
Right. That is literally the only solution I can think of without taking up too much episode time. Because you could do a whole plot where he intimidates them into being quiet. Well, that's a whole sequence then, isn't it? And that's taking away from the beach stuff.
Or don't do the joke with them. Don't have them we've got to assume this dude is some sort of tracker. Did he need to interject a letter saying the Avatar was alive? Could he not just have found them?
Well, I assume that had his location.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, but we've seen trackers just
intercepting the letter was how he found out exactly where Aang was, I guess. But you're right, actually. Would I have questioned it if he'd just turned up?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, so the simple answer, actually, is to have Aang and the gang playing about in the pool, and then sort of have the camera swing across to the other side of the canyon, and he's kind of making his way towards them, and that's ominous for later in the episode. And then we cut to later in the episode, we cut back and he reaches them, and the fight starts. Yeah. That's fine.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, you're right. That's the better way to do it.
Certainly seems smoother than killing 2 dudes on screen, but to be fair, they didn't do that, so...
Right, they cut the scene. It does seem to have been animatic, at least, because, because it was clearly, some version of it was animated to the point of it having an animatic. So,
if anyone's got the fan art on that, send that to Dan as well.
Yeah, now that I'm quite confident to Google myself without getting
without fear
some dodgy results. So there you go. That is the trivia. We're gonna skip the listener question this week because we're well over. We talked too much about stuff, but that's fine. We can do one next week. That's not a problem.
Unless you got a quick one.
Yeah, I'm skimming through. Chris, one of these questions, and I hinted at this last week, is your favourite condiment rankings. So we that's not a quick one.
No, that's not a quick one. Yeah, you're right.
Here we go. Okay, this one. From Aiden directed at me. After you asked, what do I think is Chris's best quality? Aiden asked, what do I think is Chris's worst quality? And I'll say this right now, dear listeners. It's him trying to trick me into recording on his birthday by referring to today as just Thursday, so I wouldn't put it together, which felt very
Thursday.
devious.
It is Thursday, though.
Yeah.
You wanted a chat on my birthday.
So Chris is just like, oh yeah, do you want to record on Thursday? And I tried to do the mental math in my head and got it wrong by a day. I was like, oh, I think his birthday falls on the Friday because I have the date and I have the day. And I'm like, I think, yeah, his birthday falls on the Friday. But because Chris just said Thursday without a date attached, I didn't put it together until the day before. Otherwise, I would not have let him arrange a recording on his birthday. So for anyone listening, if Chris had said to me, do you want to record on, and then given the date of his birthday, my answer would have been, no, thank you. Enjoy your day.
That's a very specific worst quality, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's certainly been inspired by to the events of today.
By recent events.
Yeah, but you've got so many worse qualities, Chris. I can only really just go to whatever the most recent one is, I
do. I'm very. I'm quite overthinky. I get quite paranoid. I've got a fairly short fuse, but I'm trying to get better at that. But yeah.
Anyway. I was trying to make it a quick jokey thing. Chris just had an existential crisis. So if you'd like to give one of us an existential crisis, feel free to go over to our Patreon where you can ask questions that we'll answer on the podcast. Patreon.com/nothingbutstatic. Go on.
Can I give I think there was a question the other week, that was something along the lines of, if you could make a show, what show would you make? And I actually, since then, have a better answer for that. Can I quickly give that?
Yeah.
You're
the one on a timer here. I'm trying to close this off quickly.
I know you are.
Because you've given me a hard out, and you've encouraged me to do a quick question, and now you're adding an answer to a previous question. But please carry on, Chris.
I know, and I apologise, but that is my it's my bad, and I know that. I've watched before, and I'd highly recommend checking it out on YouTube. I've seen it before, but I threw it on as background watching the other day. On YouTube, there's a 2-part documentary about Live Aid, I think called Live Aid Against All Odds. And the first part is the lead up to the concerts, so them sort of trying to plan this mad thing. And then the second part is the breakdown of the concert, all the stuff that went wrong, all the stuff that went right. And it's I think it would probably be better as a TV show, not a movie. But as I was watching it this time, I was like, there was one bit in particular where I was like, this would be a great TV drama, and they've done an hour-long When Harvey Met Bob thing ages ago, but a proper budget thing. How cool would it be to hear the stories of this person's been cast as Bono, this person's been cast as Freddie Mercury, but just the behind the scenes madness of them putting Live Aid together. The bit in the documentary that really made me go, this should be a film or a TV show, is there's a bit where Harvey Goldsmith is talking about how David Bowie and Mick Jagger wanted to duet, one in London and one in Philadelphia, and they were trying to work out the timing, and then someone was like, well, it's not going to work, one in Philadelphia, one in London. What if one of them was in space? So Harvey Goldsmith phoned NASA and was like, have you got any spare rockets so we can send David Bowie or Mick Jagger into space? And I was just like,
fucking amazing.
That should be a thing. It's a really good document. I'd recommend the documentary. And then, that 2-hour documentary, or however long it is, 3-hour documentary.
But you'd like a sort of like a BBC, ITV kind of Sunday night drama telling that story.
or even a HBO Max one, because I also genuinely think you could easily pull people in, because people would be interested in, who was playing the various artists, and that stuff would come later. But there's there's great stuff about them trying to convince Paul McCartney to come out of retirement, or announcing Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey hated each other at that point, and in the press conference, Bob Geldof, no one was confirmed, and Bob Geldof was just naming names, and someone passed him a bit of paper that said Pete Townsend might want to perform, as in solo, and Bob Geldof just announced that the Who are reuniting for the event. And they both went nuts. And his tactic was to basically announce everyone, and then afterwards, when they bitched and moaned, go, all right then, pull out. Pull out of this big charity event. See what happens.
Wow.
There's a lot of I think there's a lot of really good stuff in there. So yeah, that's my new answer to if I could make anything. Either the behind the scenes of RoboCop, part human, part robot, all cop, or a Live Aid docudrama.
I saw the Who play at Glastonbury.
Yeah, they were good, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. I was just thinking about it. You just considering the tension back in the 80s, it's just occurred to me that they were still cracking on.
Yeah. I think Live Aid got them back together. I think.
Yeah, I'd never really put the timeline of that together, but you're right. It's kind of a miracle they're still playing, or were still playing, I should say. I don't know if they. No.
Yeah, so they break up. They.
This is definitely irrelevant.
What is?
This chat about the Who. We should be wrapping this podcast up.
Oh yeah, good point. They seem to break up around 1980, and then in 1985, the Who performed at Live Aid.
There you go. Anywho, Thank you. If you'd like to ask a question and have Chris answer it over multiple episodes of the podcast, or if you'd like to give Chris or me an existential crisis, you can go to the patreon.com/nothing-but-static, and for as little as $1 a month, you can give us, you can get access, I should say, to our Discord and episodes 1 week early, and then we do take listener questions for the podcast, as we did today. Today's came from Aidan, as I already mentioned, who is also is one of our patrons. So you can do the same thing. There are other ways you can support us if you'd like to. You can just keep listening. Obviously, we appreciate that. Tell a friend. That helps too. If you're in the middle and you do want to do something to support us, but you're not going to, you want to go further than listening, but not as far as financial, then you can just like and review. We appreciate that too. Any of the podcasts we do, Nothing But Static, Rewind Reviews, Steven University, obviously this one, any of those podcasts, just find any of them on any podcast platform, and they all have their own review and rating systems, whether it's likes, hearts, stars, physical, like typing out reviews, whatever it is, feel free to do it. I will say, if you're going over to do it at Rewind Reviews, don't review the podcast, just tell us what your favourite, nostalgic films are and why. We prefer that. It's more interesting. I think that's everything. Oh yeah, you can support us in all the usual other places where you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/nothingbutstatic.uk. We do have video versions of these, although the video versions of these don't have anything in them at all that's worth looking at, just artwork. It's not like video. We don't film us recording these. I think that is everything. Oh yeah, twitter.com. Good old twitter.com. We have an @NothingButStatic. We don't really use it anymore, so you can just get me @Dan Doolan, or you can get Chris @CBillingham with 2 M's. I think that's everything. Fuck it. I'm going to say that's everything, so. And if I've forgotten something, who cares? So yeah, thanks everyone very much for listening. We appreciate it. Oh, you know who we haven't been given full credit to this year?
Oh yeah.
Rapho. Poor Rapho.
Yeah, Rapho.
I'm very sorry.
Raphodraws.
So Raphodraws, Instagram.com/Raphodraws, also has a Tumblr, a Twitter, and a YouTube, which you can get to. If you go to launchlinks.io/u/Raphodraws, you can get Rapho's various artworks there. Rapho supplies the sort of the key image for this podcast, the sort of apparate sunset image, very generously allowed us to use that for the podcast. And honestly, it's brilliant. We love it. Rapho does tons of other stuff fantastic. As well. That's like, they have all this artwork, and they've done like graphic novels, like digital ones. Like there's just tons of stuff you can go look through, and some of the art you can get it on like cups and mugs and stuff. Like I don't know, it's just a bunch of stuff to look through. So you should go support Rapho and let them know. Let them know we sent you. So
yeah,
next
definitely.
Episode, Chris, I'm going to tease it for you now. Get a quick little reaction. It's called The Avatar and the Fire Lord.
I was expecting it to be called The Avatar and the American Pie, so I'm happy to hear it's called The Avatar and the Fire Lord.
You were desperately need to find another sort of teen movie from that era.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to go The Avatar and the Euro Trip or something,
which would make more sense.
Sucker doesn't know. Sucker doesn't know.
That's blimey. If
So
any episode would lead into a confrontation between the Avatar and the Fire Lord, it's this one. So I'm very excited.
Yeah, well, there you go. I'm also very excited for that one. It's another classic. So this season's full of bangers, mate. I love this episode. The beach is one of my favorites. Anyway, thanks for listening, everyone. I've been Dan Doolan.
I've been Chris Billingham.
And we'll see you in a week's time when we sit down to discuss the Avatar and the Fire Lord.
That's the fire going out.
Perfect. It's good.
Bye.